Coming up on this episode, I've got some spring and Easter DIY decor ideas for you, plus I've got a huge giveaway, so let's get started. If this is the first time we're meeting, my name's Natalie Callahan, and my goal is to help you to feel more powerful in DIY and home decor. So let's get started on our first project. So our first spring and Easter DIY, we are going to be making a bunny shape cutting board. I'm going to be making my bunny cutting board out of some scrap pine wood. This is not really food grade. Mine's for more decorative purposes than actual use. If you want to use yours for food grade purposes, some hardwoods you might want to consider are maple or teak, walnut, or bamboo. I even had the idea of getting an actual cutting board and using that to cut your bunny shape out of. I don't need mine to be food grade. This is just to add a little fun into my kitchen. And so I'm just gonna use up some scrap wood. So this is free to me. And I have a free printable. It's a little bit bigger than the 8.5 by 11, so we're gonna kind of have to match it up, and I'll put a link for that in the description box below if you're interested in using it. The first thing we're gonna do is take out some graphite paper, and we are going to trace this image onto our wood. It's gonna be a pretty simple outline. We're gonna just trace that all the way around. But now that we've traced it onto the board, now we're gonna need a jigsaw, and we're gonna go outside and get powerful. We are about to get powerful, and I don't want you to be nervous because this is actually the perfect starter project if you've never worked with a jigsaw. So this is a jigsaw, and I don't want you to be scared by it. You just pull the handle, and it goes. So we have our bunny all traced onto our wood, and we're ready to cut it out. We're gonna take some precautions. I've got some earplugs because it gets kind of loud. There we go, we're gonna stick those in. And then of course, we're gonna protect our eyes with eyewear. Now you can also take a step further and put on a face mask if you'd like. My husband says that safe is sexy. We're gonna just clamp this down, and we can just kind of rotate it around as we cut. But if we clamp it into place, it will just kind of be more secure. I just don't want it to move around, so making sure it's extra secure. And you can see I didn't go in and do this cut yet because we're gonna cut it like that, and then we'll come back in and get that later. So you can see that we've got this going, and we've just done that by like cutting relief cuts, cutting one direction, then coming back in the other way. And if there's any of this little roughness here, we're gonna come back and hit this with a sander and sand it really good. So we've got one side of the bunny, and that looks pretty good. So then we'll just kind of undo this and spin it around, and we'll do the top part here. Okay, so this is gonna be a little tricky, but not crazy tricky, so. There we go, look at that. This is going good, I love it. Now that we've cut off this relief cut, we can come back in the other direction. Just this little section and we're done. We survived. Look at that. So it was just lots of little relief cuts here and there. I could have probably drilled some pilot holes with a drill, but we got the job done without doing that. But we've got our bunny, and it is cute. Now you could make these bunnies and use them as decor elsewhere, but we have a little roughness on the edges that I want to work out, and it's a little rough on the front and the back. So I'm going to give this a really good sanding. with my palm sander, and we're gonna try to take off some of these sharp corners, and then we're gonna get it ready for the next part. But I am just loving this bunny, it's so cute. So all in all, I spent about 20 minutes cutting out my bunny and sanding it to smooth. So that's not too long at all. Garbage truck. Shh, don't you know I'm filming? There's always something going on. Always noise. Now I just want to add a little extra to this cutting board. So we are going to make a stencil with our Cricut machine that says Happy Easter. To do this, we go into Cricut Design Studio and we select shapes. Now I know that I have about 5 1/4 inches to work with, so I make a square in that size. Then I type in Happy in all caps in Cricut's regular font. And then I write Easter in Stay Girly font, which is actually one of my favorite fonts, and I downloaded that from dafont.com. And I separate these letters out individually so that I can place them how I like. After I get them how I like it, I just weld them all together. Now I know that I want this to be towards the bottom of the cutting board, so I just place this where I want it to be, and then I slice it into a stencil. Now if you are unfamiliar with how to use Design Space, I did a recent tutorial where I walk you through pretty much everything you need to know to get you started. I will link that episode in the description box below. And then I just cut it out on my Cricut Explore Air 2. Now it's time to add our design to our cutting board. You could do this one of two ways, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my scorch marker and fill in my stencil. And then I'm going to take out my heat gun and burn the image into my cutting board. And if you don't have a heat gun or a scorch marker, another thing that I thought you could do is take your stencil and fill it in with some antiquing wax. That kind of just makes it more of like a stained effect rather than painted or something like that. I just thought that would look more appropriate on a cutting board. One thing to be aware of when using a heat gun on pine is that the heat will cause the board to weep out sap. So don't be alarmed by this. This is normal. And it has not happened to me when using actual cutting boards if you decide to go down that route. You can kind of sand off the sap a little bit when it's cooled down. Now for this next part, I keep going back and forth whether I'm glad I did this or not in the end, but at this point I decide to darken up the wood by using some antiquing wax. And the reason I did this was so that it would blend in better with my other cutting boards, but it really does look cute, high contrast. So if you like this look, just leave it in its natural state and maybe put a sealer on it. I think it would look really good like that, but after I get the antiquing wax on, I just kind of sand it down a little bit all over and on the edges, and that's it. In the end, I'm glad I did use the antiquing wax because it really does blend well with my other wood pieces. I think this is a subtle yet classy way to bring in a holiday without being too overly thematic. This little cutting board cost me next to nothing, but brings in such Easter charm to my kitchen area. It is so cute, and it actually makes me smile. To me, nothing says spring more than lilac. So for my next spring DIY, I'm going to be taking this kind of orangey crate that I picked up at a thrift store for $2 several years ago. I liked the idea of this crate, but I've always hated this kind of orangey color. But we can change this up really easy by just simply painting or staining it. And I've decided to go ahead and stain it in this Briar Smoke gel stain. Before we stain it, I'm going to remove this rope because it is also kind of in that orangey color, and if I decide I want to add a rope back into it, I can just use some regular rope. But I don't think we're going to necessarily need it because we're going to be putting a floral arrangement in it. So I'm not quite sure what happened to the footage of me staining this in the Briar Smoke gel stain. I don't know if I missed hitting record or what happened exactly, but I think that process is pretty self-explanatory, and so I hope you will forgive me in that error. After I stained it, then I let it dry overnight, but you don't necessarily need to do that. You could probably just wait a few hours. And then I always just go back over it and kind of wipe off the excess with a rag or a towel. and I sanded it down to kind of give it more of a time-worn look. Now, it usually takes at least a day or two for the gel stain to fully cure. So make sure you keep that in mind and have something underneath it until you know that it's completely dry before placing it onto something that it might stain or damage. And then once we have this stained, I thought it would look really cute to add a fresh flower market on the front of our crate in a black chalk paint. And we're just gonna take another Cricut stencil and we are going to just stencil that on. Now don't forget to stick with me to the very end because I've got a very huge giveaway, and if you don't have a Cricut machine, you're gonna wanna stay tuned for this. I have made it easy for you in the fact that I've already designed a fresh flower market image for you, and a link for that will be provided for you in the description box below the video. Once you have downloaded that, I wanted to show you how easy it is to upload your image. Just go into your files, select image, pick simple, moderate, or complex. In our case, it's simple, and then all you need to do is insert image. And then we are going to create a rectangle in the size of your working area and then just cut it out on your Cricut machine. Now, once you have your stencil all ready to go, just place it on the front of your crate. Now, if you've watched my channel for a while, you know that I typically at this point will seal all of the edges to prevent bleeding. But I'm not as concerned this time around because we are going to be going for more of a rustic look, and I'm going to sand it off a little bit afterwards anyway. So I just very carefully pounce on black ink chalk paint onto the stencil. And once it's dry, I peel back the stencil and then I sand it down just a bit. And then I place some floral foam in the center, but I don't even tape it into place because it was the perfect size that actually the crate itself put some pressure on the side, and I may want to use this for something else in the future. So now for our fresh flower market crate, we need some fresh flowers in it. I actually picked these ones up at the Dollar Tree, and I was surprised at how nice these looked. I'm really fussy when it comes to the Dollar Tree. I am really picky and choosy, but I really liked these lilacs. Now this is just a simple arrangement and kind of just doing a dome shape here and trying to make it look as it would in nature. So I just evenly spread this around and then I add some springy looking greenery to kind of fill it in. I like to add the flowers first, and this just comes from my years working in a couple of different floral shops. I've seen it done where you green things up first and then the reverse where you put in the flowers in first and then the other greenery at the end. It makes more sense to me to add the flowers first because a lot of times what would happen is I would over green the arrangement and add more greenery than necessary, and I would have to remove some of it to fit all of the flowers in that I wanted to put as I was arranging. So this is just kind of a personal preference thing that has come from my years as a florist. And as a funny side note, I know it doesn't really have anything to do with what we're talking about here, but it's just so funny to me that I have such a terrible time with potted greenery and flowers, given the fact that I worked in a floral shop that had a nursery. But for some reason, I didn't learn anything from that because to this day, I still struggle with potted flowers. But I've learned a lot of tips from all of you who have given me wonderful advice that I might just get brave again this spring and attempt to pot flowers once again. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe I'm just partial, but I don't think Dollar Tree has ever looked so good. With a thrift store crate, a little gel stain, and some help from Cricut, I have an arrangement that I think is gorgeous, so springy, and a crate that I can use for anything I want in the future. But what do you think? I'm going to be customizing some Easter eggs because I feel like you can't do spring and Easter without some kind of eggs, and I want mine to be super classy. So I picked up these plastic eggs from Michael's and they were on sale, so they were like $3.50. Now you could probably find something at the Dollar Tree. I liked these because they were already a good white color and they didn't have like a seam in the middle, you know, because they don't open. They're meant to be decorative. So I took half of these outside and stuck an extra long toothpick in the bottom and placed them on some foam and spray painted them in a black chalkboard paint. Then I took 3 of them and started to paint them in a gold acrylic paint, but because I wanted a smoother finish, ultimately I took them outside and spray painted them in a gold spray paint instead, which I didn't get on camera. With everything painted, I went into Cricut Design Studio just to do a simple Happy Easter, which was pretty much identical to my cutting board, just on a much smaller scale. I used an egg image from the Cricut library to help me kind of arrange this, and I calculated a total height of 2¼ inch. With the Happy Easter, how I liked it, I welded it all together, and then I made a whole bunch of polka dots that were about 1/3 inch in size. Then I decided that the Happy Easter needed a little something underneath it, so I went into the image library and found a laurel for that, and I welded that all together. Then I cut them out in gold foil. If you're using a Cricut Explore Air 2 like I am, just turn the dial to custom and it will give you a whole bunch more options to choose from, and you'll find the adhesive foil in there. I have found a couple things with gold foil that you need to know. The first is you need to add a little extra pressure when you're cutting this, and also after weeding, you're going to want to use a strong grip transfer tape because the standard grip will just not adhere to it at all. So just use that strong grip. Now our vinyl is ready to apply, and it's going to be kind of tricky because we're using a curved surface of the egg. So I start in the middle on the word Easter first, and I work from the center out, and then I go from top to bottom or whatever order you want to work in, but you're basically working from the center out on all of it. And you could just take your time with this and you will be fine, I promise, if you're just careful and a little bit patient. Then I took 2 of the black eggs and 2 of the white eggs and put the gold vinyl polka dots on in a random pattern all the way around, kind of doing them one at a time. I figured this was better to do it this way because our surface is going to be curved in an egg shape, and it would have been impossible to kind of just wrap it all the way around and have it work out. So we do these one at a time. Then I took a couple and I took the tip of a craft tool, and I'm not exactly sure what this tool is called, but I got it at the Dollar Tree. Or you could use a pen or a toothpick or whatever you have on hand, and you just take the tip of it and dip it into some gold paint that was similar in tone, and then dot some tiny little polka dots mimicking our larger ones just on a smaller scale. And then I let those dry on a toothpick kind of in a similar manner as we spray painted as well. Now these little Easter eggs were kind of a breakout surprise for me. I knew I would like them, but I really love these. They turned out so cute, and you can also see my little moss bunnies from a long past episode are keeping them company. I just placed them on some green Spanish moss in a glass cylinder vase, and I placed that on a flipped over gold bowl that I picked up at Ross the other day for a few bucks, and I have a really cute display. I love these Easter eggs, but what do you think? Make sure you stay tuned to the very end for that big announcement. All right, so next up, you're gonna need an 8 by 12 piece of wood, very thin, you can see here, because we are going to make a fresh flower market sign for a hanging sign that we made at Christmas time. Now, I'm gonna give you a refresher on how we made this at Christmas. And so what we did is we used another one of those outdoor deck spindles. They have two different sizes of these outdoor deck spindles. One is a little bit smaller, one's a little bit bigger, and then they have the newel posts, which are obviously really large. We took the middle-sized one, and it was like $3. And then I used a whole bunch of different scrap pieces of wood and put together kind of this hanging sign, almost kind of like a for sale sign, but like on a smaller scale, and much cuter. But if you want to see the full tutorial, I will link that in the description box below. I go over exactly how to make these. I've had several of you actually make them, and they've turned out amazing. I've been so impressed with them. And I promised more signs. So we're gonna make one that says Fresh Flower Market. And I found this SVG on Etsy. And I found that you can find so many designs off of Etsy, very inexpensive. They're professionally designed, ready to go, super easy. Now, if you haven't had the opportunity to invest in a Cricut machine yet, you can still get the SVG, download it, and maybe do a tracing technique. The nice thing about having a Cricut machine is it makes everything so much easier, crisper, cleaner lines, more professional looking, which is what I love. But I'll link all of the SVGs that I have purchased in the description box so that you know exactly where to go to get them. I found this one, I thought it was perfect, especially for the shape and size of ours. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take care of that in Cricut Design Studio. Then we're gonna go ahead and just paint out our entire sign, front and back, in a white chalk paint. And once that's dry, then we are gonna apply our stencil, and then we're gonna smooth it down. And then before we actually do the black chalk paint, what we're gonna do is take the original white color and paint over all of the edges. So when it bleeds the original color. This helps to create really crisp, clean lines, and it's awesome. And then once that's dry, we're gonna take some black paint, and I'm going to use chalk paint just because I feel like it, when I peel off my stencils, it peels off nicer, but feel free to use acrylic. I just feel like I have better luck with chalk paint, and that's why I use that. Then once that's dry, we're going to peel back our stencil and take it outside and drill some holes that line up with our hooks. Then we simply hook on our sign. Now, I really wanted to play up that fresh flower market idea, so I just added some florals and greenery that I had in my stash, and it is not affixed to the sign very good at all. I just kind of twisted the stems around things to kind of hold it in place. I want to be able to easily remove it when I am ready to change it out. But I'm really happy with the sign. I feel like this could get me well into the summer months, and this was super cheap for me to make. Now I have used this hanging sign for a couple of seasons, and I can see switching it out with other ones in the future, so stay tuned for that. Now, I recently redid my living room. If you haven't seen that episode yet, it was so much fun to put together. I will link that below. But I did a whole bunch of pillows. Well, I have a ginormous sofa, and I have plenty of places to put pillows. So my next DIY is kind of an Easter themed pillow cover. And I ordered these off of Amazon, and I wanted to try out one of Cricut's new products, and that is the infusible ink. They have a whole bunch of colors and designs, and what makes it a little different is instead of a vinyl that kind of like sits on top, it infuses the ink right into the fabric. So I bought this SVG for really inexpensive off of Etsy that says like Peter Cottontail Bead Company, and I just thought that that would look really cute on my sofa. And so we are going to take this infusible ink and we are going to cut this design out on it. Now, I've seen some recommendations to put more pressure on the settings when cutting this. I would not personally recommend this, but I did have a very fresh and sharp blade on my machine. When I originally tried and added more pressure, it cut all the way through. So I don't recommend that unless maybe you have a dull blade. Now on the screen, this infusible ink looks brown. It is black. So if you buy infusible ink and it shows up kind of a weird color, not what you were expecting, just know that it will change colors with heat. The other thing I would recommend is maybe going with a much simpler design than I did, because this is a little bit more complicated and a little bit more tricky. It did work out in the end, but the tiny nature of it did make it a bit more tedious. Another thing you need to know is that the fabric needs to be at least 60 to 65% polyester for this to work right. My pillow cover ended up being 100% polyester, so that's perfect for this. I set my easy press at 380 degrees for 40 seconds. Before I press this, I put in a piece of parchment paper in between. Now, I don't know if this was necessary or not, but I've never used the infusible ink before, and I was a little bit worried about the ink bleeding through. Then I also placed a piece of parchment paper on the top of our transfer. Then I press it with slight pressure for 40 seconds. Now, my design ended up kind of peeking out the edges because it was a little bit larger than my easy press. So towards the end, I flipped the direction the other way very carefully because you don't want to move the ink or it will smudge. But I was worried about scorching my fabric, so I didn't leave it down for very long in this direction. That was a mistake because the ink didn't take very well on the top and the bottom. But once I peeled it back, it was done, and that was that. Also, when I first saw the heat transfer all crinkled up, I had a minor short-lived panic attack thinking I had ruined it because of the crinkled up appearance. I thought I just screwed it up. Once I lifted it back, I realized it was okay. So not flawless execution on this one, but you can't really tell, especially when I knife my pillow. I really love this infusible ink, and I know that I will be using this again in the future because it just has such a professional quality to it. But I love this classy little bunny pillow on my sofa. All right, so I bet you are all wondering about this huge giveaway. Now, if you watched this episode here where I kind of walk you through how to use a Cricut machine, if you've never used one, it's all of the basic how to get started. I announced a very big giveaway. Now, this is the second episode in that giveaway. Now, to enter the giveaway, you have to watch this episode and that episode and comment on both episodes. And there's a secret phrase or word for each one of those episodes. So if you want to know what the secret word for that episode is, you're gonna have to watch it and follow the instructions of that video. For this video, the secret word is spring DIY decor. I will be selecting a winner from the comment section, and you have to have commented on both episodes to be entered to win. I am so excited to give out this machine. I just love owning a Cricut machine, and I just want to share the love. Now, it's just my little way of saying thank you. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if so, here's another one that I think you'll like as well. And to all of my DIY Niners, I just want to remind you that you are more powerful than you know. We'll see you next time. Bye.